we haven't ended police brutality today, but we've sent a very clear message.
A multi-million-dollar payout because of injuries at the hands of police during the 2020 protests.
I mean, this is certainly a step, but verdicts and convictions don't bring justice.
A struggle to get fentanyl out of the hands of Coloradans.
This game isn't going to be over in 5 minutes. We're now playing chess.
We sit down with law enforcement working to clean up our communities.
Plus, a new plan to protect Colorado's most vulnerable.
I know how the system is supposed to work. It's not working.
How our state is helping families under court-ordered guardianship.
Sometimes you are compelled to do something that is right.
Good evening, and thank you for watching Denver 7 News at 10. I'm Ann Trujillo.
And I'm Brian Wang. Almost 2 years after the George Floyd protests, a federal jury has sided with 12 protesters who were hurt at the hands of police.
Those 12 protesters were awarded $14 million in damages in the first federal court case about police force used during the protests.
Denver 7's Rob Harris joins us live tonight. And Rob, those protesters actually felt pretty vindicated today.
So much so that they were literally cheering through the streets of downtown Denver, so you could say that again.
Yeah.
They do feel like this is a step in the right direction for Denver, but they also say they'll wake up tomorrow and they'll keep fighting for more police reform.
It feels really good to be seen and to be heard and to have a jury validate what we already knew was true.
Elizabeth Epps and 11 of her fellow protesters from 2020 have been awarded a lot of money by a jury for what they experienced at the hands of police. But for them, the victory is about a lot more than cash.
We were crying and grieving and feeling and fellowshipping, and it was really deeply validating to be seen in that way.
Epps was tear gassed and shot and bruised multiple times with projectiles that hit her in the face. She was awarded $1.25 million by the jury. Claire Sanier was awarded $1 million for being shot with pepper balls and tear gas.
I was hit a number of times. One time I was hit for filming them. Like, they watched me film an interaction that they were having with a community member, and they opened fired on the community member and then shot me directly.
The verdicts mostly surrounded the First and Fourth Amendment rights of the protesters. The First Amendment guaranteeing the right to peacefully assemble, and the Fourth Amendment protecting against unreasonable searches or arrests. The jury ruled in favor of each protester, though to varying degrees.
The system got this one right today, so on we press.
In a statement, the city of Denver said changes have been made to DPD policy on the use of less lethal force for crowd control, and said it will continue to evaluate policies and training. But as far as these protesters are concerned, those actions and even their victory in court aren't enough.
I mean, this is certainly a step, but verdicts and convictions don't bring justice.
I'm sleeping in tomorrow, and then tomorrow afternoon we get back to work.
The protesters weren't just celebrating with each other outside the courthouse today. I also saw them acknowledge two of the jurors in the case who had come out of the courthouse and congratulated them. They also told them how emotional their testimony had made them when they were hearing it in the court.
Wow.
So really, though, this isn't the end of the legal road here.
No, and so the lawyer in this case and one of the plaintiffs are going to be in a part of a class action lawsuit that's going to determine if the curfews that were put in place during the protests violated their rights. And if they found that they are, that could mean more payouts and more policy changes.
Certainly something we're going to have to follow up on. Rob, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
Appreciate it. All right, the city of Denver has already paid out millions in settlements over the 2020 protests. The city has shelled out $3 million in settlements, and more than $1.3 million of that has been paid out just this year.
And let's give you some more context on what changes the city's Department of Public Safety has made in light of these protests. They have stopped the use of 40mm less lethal equipment for purposes of crowd control. Changes have been made to how officers can use pepper balls. And the city says officers have also been given more training on crowd control.
Breaking news tonight in the music industry. Taylor Hawkins, who is the drummer for the Foo Fighters, has died. The band shared this message on their Twitter page within the past hour. The post says they have been devastated by the tragic and untimely loss of Hawkins. The Foo Fighters are currently on tour in Colombia, while the band has a planned stop right here in Denver in August. There's no word on how their tour will be impacted. Hawkins was just 50 years old.
First Lady Dr. Jill Biden is in Colorado. Her plane touched down at DIA earlier this evening. And this weekend, Dr. Biden is attending events with the Democratic National Committee, the Latin American Educational Foundation, and the White House Initiative Latino Economic Summit. Dr. Biden was earlier this year when she toured Marshall fire damage with the president.
All right, new tonight, the Biden administration is planning to give Americans aged 50 and older the option of a second booster shot. The New York Times reports this would be for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. The FDA could authorize doses next week. Sources say the White House wouldn't necessarily recommend people get a second booster, but the option would be there if they want one. At the moment, there is no telling how long the protection from a second booster would last.
Drug overdose deaths, they're on the rise in Colorado. And according to a preliminary report from the Colorado Health Department obtained by our partners at the Denver Post, 1,757 people died from overdoses over the past year. That is up more than 700 since pre-pandemic. And while the data doesn't break down overdoses by type of drug, fentanyl overdose deaths are on the rise. And Colorado law enforcement says they remain diligent in trying to take this powerful synthetic opioid out of the community. Here's Denver 7 CB Cotton.
Take these people off the streets.
A scared mother shared her concerns with us earlier this month, hoping the people who sold her daughter a fentanyl-laced pill would soon be arrested. She says the dealers are still on the street.
They're still dealing to the children here in your community in Thornton, Colorado.
But busting dealers takes time, according to the Adams County Sheriff, Richard Reigenborn.
They may say, well, but my son or daughter is getting it from this one person. That one person's getting it from somebody else. And so we're trying to cut off that supply chain, not just there, but farther up as well.
His agency works closely with the North Metro Task Force. The force investigates illicit drug operations in the area, and fentanyl has become a dangerous opponent. Investigators here with the North Metro Task Force say in 2020 they seized minimal amounts of fentanyl, but come 2021 there was a huge increase. Last summer during this drug bust, the force seized a little more than 40,000 fentanyl pills, and this year they expect to find even more.
Just last week, patrol deputies in Adams County located over 20,000 pills of fentanyl.
Sheriff Reigenborn says the uptick has led to close calls.
And just this last year, one of our deputies opened up a package that had fentanyl in it, and he had to start administering Narcan to himself.
The solution to the fentanyl crisis has many factors, Reigenborn says, but he believes their part, finding the dealers, is a priority.
We're actually doing the hand-to-hand deal so that we don't have an informant or somebody's child placed in danger. So we're trying to take our undercover officers and get them in a place to where they can actually do the hand-to-hand deal, so that when we take that case to the DA, we can say, I personally did the drug deal between him and them.
But he emphasizes the detective work can and will take time.
We're not playing checkers. This game isn't going to be over in 5 minutes. We're now playing chess.
And the pawns in this game have become anyone buying almost any drug off the street. In Adams County, I'm CB Cotton, Denver 7.
And just yesterday, state lawmakers introduced a bill to cut down on fentanyl deaths. It would strengthen penalties for people who distribute fentanyl. If someone dies as a result of distribution, dealers would then be charged with a level 1 drug felony. And the bill would also require mandatory substance use assessments and treatment as part of sentencing.
And it's really no surprise that Colorado wants to put a bigger focus on behavioral health support. Today, a House committee passed a bill to create a new behavioral health administration. It would create a support system in every region of the state, focusing on substance use, crisis services, and criminal justice diversion. This was the first hearing for the bill.
Colorado's job market has rebounded. The state's Department of Labor and Employment shows more people are employed now than before when the pandemic started in early 2020. Of course, the issue now is inflation. The rising cost of food has forced a Colorado Springs restaurant, for example, to pass the costs on to you. Urban Tandoor in the Springs is now charging a 5% inflation fee. It can be found on the bottom of your receipt as well as posted on a sign as you walk in the door.
Our food costs from before COVID to now has doubled almost 40 to 50%. It's just hard for us to, just keep changing the menus and having them reprinted.
And the restaurant says they have had an angry customer or two, but for the most part, people are understanding. The Federal Reserve hiked interest rates to help offset inflation, and more rate hikes are expected this year.
All right, you better get ready. The biggest night in Hollywood returns this weekend right here on Denver 7.
So if you are planning to watch the 94th edition of the Academy Awards, there is a local connection you'll want to know about.
Derek Hodge is a Denver-based composer. He is directing the music for this year's award show. That's pretty big news there. Hodge has worked with some of the biggest names in music, including Common, Kanye West and Quincy Jones. Once he's done with the Oscars, he's moving on to another award show.
It's been fun working for the Oscars right now and doing this. And I just getting started working on some things for the Grammys for a very cool upcoming performance in a couple of weeks.
Nice. Derek composes most of his music from his home studio right here in Denver. He is one of 3 black composers directing the music for this year's show. The Oscars are this Sunday right here on Denver 7, and ABC News coverage of the red carpet. That all begins early, 4:30, followed by the awards show. That's at 6 o'clock, and then Denver 7 News after the Oscars.
Sometimes you're compelled to do something that is right.
Common sense goes a long way.
These innocent victims are treated worse than prisoners.
But special interests can be blinding.
Frankly, the Bar Association needs to get out of the way.
For months, Denver 7 Investigates has exposed concerns within the state's conservatorship system.
My mother's estate has been depleted more than $1.5 million in the last 4.5 years.
Now, state lawmakers are considering better protections.
You don't even have to think about this very long to know what is right.